Top of the day to you all, and you are welcome to another section of scientific method, which has to do with science process skills. The following science process skills were identified, among others, as relevant to the teaching and learning of science. The first one is observation. As the name implies, this skill involves you as science students noting the properties of objects and situations using the five senses of seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, and touching. The other one is classification. Classification means sorting out things according to their types or properties. And when you are classifying, it can be in various forms. Animals can be classified according to the number of legs they have, or whether they are vertebrates or invertebrate, that is, animal with backbones or without backbones, or whether they are domestic or wild animal. In the like manner, objects can be grouped according to their colors, shapes, or sizes. Thus, the ideas or even events can be classified according to their similarities. The other one is number relations. When you say number relations, we count, measure, draw graphs, and work out equations. And anytime you do this kind of a thing, you are engaging in science skill known as number relation. In number relations, information is presented and analyzed in a more economic and meaningful manner. The other one is measurements. In science, we measure, and this involves expressing the amount of objects or substance in quantitative terms. For example, we measure volumes in cubic centimeters, cubic meters, or cubic decimeters. Length or width of object can be measured in millimeter, centimeter, meter, kilometer, etc. Then also time, we measure time. Time can be measured in seconds, minutes, or hours. To be able to measure accurately requires a lot of practice and is one of the skills a scientist must be aware of. The other one is space-time relations. Space-time relation involves visualizing and manipulating objects and events, dealing with distance, shape, time, and speed. Science students have to be taught through activities involving continued practice of relative positions of objects to one another. Concepts such as left hand and right hand, above and below, in front and behind, before and after, etc. need to be taught in order to enable pupils put objects or events in their correct perspective. Then we have communication. There are many ways by which people communicate with one another. These include talking, writing, and using gesture with the hands. There is no way we can understand what one has in mind except through communication. Communication requires time and practice to develop, and scientists, they have special way of communicating their findings. They can do this by talking, writing, drawing charts, plotting graphs. In this way, the result of their findings can be explained. Some scientific communication skills include the ability to communicate orally, communicate in writing or by diagrams, draw and interpret graphs, and draw and interpret tables and data, set out work clearly and simply, apply mathematical processes, use scientific language, etc. We also have prediction, we have inference, we have making operational divinations, formulating hypotheses, Of course, in our previous classes, I told you that a hypothesis is an intelligence guess, something that is tentative, which you still have to put into experimenting in order to know the finding or to know the basic truth about what you have suggested. So if you put an hypothesis forward, you still have to put it to test, so that whoever tests same hypothesis will get the same result you have in mind. We have interpreting data. In this process of investigation, a scientist experiments. Among other things, he observed and records his data. Once he has recorded his data, the next step is to see what meaning he can make out from them. To interpret is to give meaning to the observation. Interpretation is what one thinks is happening or why it is happening. Thus, when a scientist elucidates or explains data presented in form of graphs, tables, etc., he is engaged in the process of data interpretation. Then we have identifying and controlling variables. Like I said, a variable is anything that changes. In an experiment, a variable can change and affect the results. Suppose in an experiment to investigate some condition necessary for seeds to germinate, you obtain 2 pots A and B, each with the same kind of soil. If you sow 2 healthy bean seeds, one in each of the pots, suppose you provided pot A with adequate air, water, and sunlight, and put pot B with adequate air and water, but put it away from sunlight. That is, you put it inside a dark room. You'll be able to identify. You will watch the seed grow for several days. At the end of the experiment, you'll be able to identify the sunlight role. That is, that sunlight there is a variable placed in seed germination. Having identified the variable, you'll be in a better position to control the effect of sunlight in seed germination. So, identifying and controlling variables in a science setting is important in establishing cause and effect relationships in day-to-day activities. The last but not the least there is experimenting. Of course, this process is a high-level one. It involves checking out how right or wrong your guess is. You know, the other time you talk about hypothesis. This is where you put your hypothesis to test. You put your hypothesis to test under experimenting. Here you try out your hypothesis. Many years ago, sailors who were not fed on a balanced diet suffered from a disease called scurvy. Captain Cook hypothesized that a chemical called vitamin C was responsible for that. I hope you are listening. He fed those sailors with oranges and green vegetables. You know, oranges and vegetables, they are rich in vitamin C, which contain vitamin C. And to his surprise, he found that the sailors became healthy. In his experiment, he found that his hypothesis was right. You know, he hypothesized that those sailors that were falling sick, they were falling sick because of the absence of vitamin C in their diet. So he said he experimented it by feeding them with foods rich in vitamin C. And at the end of the observation, the sailors became healthy, which means his hypothesis is right. A good science worker should be able to devise simple experiments to obtain new knowledge, which can be applied to unfamiliar situations. You should also be able to draw valid conclusions based on observation. With this, we have come to the end of this section, which talk about science process skills. I will meet you in the next session. Good day.